Hello and welcome to My Voices Have Tourettes, and that's why they call me Mr. Crazy. My name is Dan Zerin, I am your host. Today's episode is brought to you by Gamesless Studio, where we are recording The Secret Cellar, Iceland's first and only comedy club. You would never believe it's the first and only with such a small country, but of course, first and only. And finally, Smári's Volcano Sauce, the best hot sauces I've ever had in my life. Highly recommend all of them. But let's get right to this. So my guest today is a wonderful dear friend of mine who actually started off as a fan of our show, My Voices Have Tourettes, and has now been performing in it for about 2 years now. So let's welcome to this podcast, Stefnir Benediktsson. Stefnir, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Hi.
So Stefnir is our, I guess the only way to say it, our token autistic bipolar performer here. He is, but you call yourself Mr. Crazy.
Sure, because there's a lot of stuff that's going on.
A lot of stuff going on. Yeah, we've always had this kind of conversation about the fact that like when we started the show, I never really thought I had too much until I actually started listing everything that I had.
Right.
Like we had that photo shoot we did where we're like, all right, so what is everything that we have? And I'm like, all right, well, I've got Tourette syndrome. I've got panic disorder, OCD, anxiety. Oh crap, I got depression. Oh no, I've got, just listing them off.
Yeah, the list goes on and on.
and then you get the paper and you're just like, what don't I have?
Easier. It's just easier to list those things.
But let's just kind of start this off with because you've been doing comedy now for how long now?
Well, I think we started around the same time, but I'm really bad with time.
So roughly 4 years.
Yeah,
roughly 4 years,
something like that. Yeah.
And how did you get started in stand-up comedy? Because I know you weren't talking about this stuff beforehand.
No, the funny thing is, I sort of got roped into it by a friend of mine. I'd just recently been reintroduced to the drag scene here, and I'd done a couple of drag shows, and I started hanging out at Gaukurinn, and there I met Bella, who was sort of connected to the scene, the stand-up scene, and she was always pushing me and pulling on me to get started, and Gisli was her boyfriend at the time, and Gisli was the Golden Gang Comedy host. So at one point, I just sort of, I'd made 5 minutes of material by accident. And
by accident?
Yeah, well, funny story. I was just mowing my mom's lawn. And I was bored. I didn't have any music or nothing, and I just started thinking. And when I was done, it was just like, wait a minute, that's 5 minutes right there. And so I rushed down to Gaukurinn, and the show had already started. And I go to Gisli, and I was just like, hey, is there any chance I could fucking participate? That'd be great. And he just asked me, do you have 5 minutes? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And that's how it got started.
It's like the opposite of how you joined My Voices Have Tourettes. So
yeah.
You came to me and you were just like, hey, Dan, I was hoping maybe I could do a set. And I'm like, well, how much material do you have on Crazy? How much time do you want me to do?
Yeah.
But you so you started off, at the open mics, and you got started that way.
Totally.
You've told me that basically you started talking about, the autism and bipolar disorder with My Voices Have Tourettes.
Absolutely.
How was it when because you had never talked about it, very openly, how was it in the beginning starting to be open with it?
It felt liberating, actually. I was worried that I'd be shy about it or that I'd feel uncomfortable about it, but it was just liberating. It felt great.
Yeah, I feel like every one of us has kind of had the same feeling that, because it's interesting that it's like when you first start stand up. To describe how it felt for me, it was like when I very first started stand up, because it's terrifying.
Absolutely.
Just that thought of saying to someone, I have Tourette syndrome, is terrifying that first time. But then once you do it, once you finally get that out, it just feels so good to finally be open about it.
Right.
That then once people start talking to you and they're just like, hey, what's it like? You just go,
yeah,
let me tell you.
Here we go.
Yeah. And And I mean, you have not looked back. I've noticed that.
No.
I mean, even in the other stand-up nights outside of Voices, you do talk about this stuff still.
Sure, a little bit. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of funny there. Actually, people think it's all crying under a blanket, but there's actually a lot of funny there because it gives you such a unique perspective on life in general. Having all these disorders and syndromes,
And do you remember? Because one of the questions I've gotten asked when I spoke at schools was like the beginning of like what made me realize that my tics were funny to me. Do you remember like any of the first jokes about like either autism or anxiety or bipolar disorder that it was like kind of like the Kickstarter in making you realize that you could laugh yourself about it?
Well, the thing is, I was just talking to my friends about my manic episode, and they'd seen me do stand-up, and it was like unanimous. They just went, "This is material, man. You got to do something with this. Write something about this." And that's sort of how it went for me. It was, I had never realized that it was stand-up material until people told me, this is funny, this is good.
Yeah, and I mean, really, every one of us in this group has anxiety.
Sure.
But I've noticed, I mean, you and Thodaller have kind of a special level of anxiety where, I mean, and you've talked about it in your stand-up. You say that, like, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I really hope that the room is packed and full of people because I'm hoping it's going to be a good show. Yeah. But at the same time, please don't talk to me after the show. But at the same time, please talk to me after the show.
Because I really need the validation. Yeah.
But how has it been? I mean, you've had a lot of people come up to you after the shows.
Yeah, and it's always really good. It's always positive feedback. I've never had that, I've never had anyone have an issue with it. And it's felt great. I've had people with manic, I've had people with bipolar disorder approach me. I've had autistic people approach me, and I've had family members and friends of people that have what I have, and they all seem very grateful for me talking about it, for my unique perspective on it, and they also feel somewhat, well, pride is maybe not the way to describe it, but it gives them some sort of a
relief,
yeah, and they're sort of, so I toot my own horn, in awe of my courage for putting it all out there.
Well, we've had that. I mean, we've had that at the schools that we've spoken at. It's, I mean, there's always people because it is baffling. There's never really been anything like this. There's never been really a group of comedians that have banded together to really talk about everything. I know there have been shows about, like one-on-one comedian will talk about Tourette's syndrome, or one-on-one comedian will talk about autism. I think there's actually a show that was out of New York with a group that each of them are autistic. I think they were doing a show about that, so with a similar vibe. But I don't think anyone's really done to the extent that we've had, where we've had people with very, very, like the neurodiversity. And I think that's why people get so stunned by it, because they've never seen this. I mean, I like to tell you, one of the reasons why I was so anxious to start this show was simply because I've never had this. And I wanted this when I was a kid because it would have made me feel like I belonged.
Right. Same here. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you've talked about, like on stage, you talk about autism and you talk about bipolar disorder and anxiety. I think anxiety is kind of the one that people generally know a bit about, but bipolar, I mean, you always talk about how it gets a bit of a bad rep because people think it's just one or the other.
Right. Yeah. But in the loops and curves of the disorder, there's a lot of middle ground there where you're sort of where you feel relatively normal, and you're not always either manic or depressed. You feel sometimes you get to experience normal.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to talk about the manic episodes, because the thing is, from an outside perspective, I mean, like all we ever really hear about manic episodes is from the outside perspective, and it's kind of the same with Tourette syndrome and autism. It's usually the family or the friends that are talking about their experiences. Yeah, but we don't tend to hear the actual side of it, because for the listeners listening in, I've talked in previous episodes about the trips that we've done to Finland and Sweden, and in Sweden, if you don't mind me talking about
that's
this,
fine.
We got to experience you in a manic episode. Right. I will say, doing an escape room with a guy during a manic episode. Truly a moment.
Yeah.
Truly a moment.
Yeah.
But basically from our perspective, so the listeners can understand what it was like from our perspective, and then I want to hear from your side, was basically you got a lot more, like your temper became a lot less. Or
right.
like less,
I got more easily agitated.
Easily agitated, and it became quicker that you would get agitated. Mm-hmm. And so you ended up having kind of a bit of aggression toward everyone. Mm-hmm. One thing that we've talked about, personally, is with autism, how very often autistic people don't recognize sarcasm right away.
Right, that's true.
And I remember you were trying to be sarcastic with us, and you weren't quite grasping it. You were just kind of saying things like you were just like, yeah, so you guys are just being a bunch of assholes right now, and we were like, wait, what? And then 5 minutes later, you would say, "Was that not sarcasm?"
Right.
And we were like, "Oh, no." And it everything just kind of had a bit of aggression, on it. But what was your side of it? What was going on your end?
Well, in a manic episode, my brain moves really quickly. Thoughts come in and thoughts go out at a really rapid pace. So it's probably hard to keep up. Mm-hmm. And there's just a lot of impatience there. And I wouldn't say aggression, but with the impatience and with the lack of understanding. Because I don't understand why you people can't keep up. I don't understand why you don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm just being me. I'm just being a normal me, but I'm not.
Well, no. On your end, it probably, to you, it's reality.
Yeah.
To you, that's
totally.
that's just how people should be,
Totally.
thinking. And I totally understand, because we've talked about that idea that the scariest, I would say one of the scariest things from an outside perspective of bipolar disorder with a manic episode is that, like, to people that aren't experiencing it, we would describe it as, this is just, what you were thinking, but it wasn't real. But it was very real to you. Very real. It's very real to you.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
to say that it wasn't real is it's almost not. That's not really true.
No, it is essentially a natural response to an unnatural situation. Because my brain is getting all these signals,
right,
and they're happening really quickly. And they're false.
Yeah.
But my response to them has to be to those signals because it's all I have.
Well, you mentioned that you didn't view it as aggression, and it wasn't aggression.
No.
When we were in Sweden, you described it as you just had a lot of passion for this topic. And I've noticed with other people I've talked to, like when you get people that get so passionate about something that they sound angry at you, but they're not angry at you.
Not at all.
It's just that they're getting really, intense about something because I just want to make my point.
Yeah.
But it's passion. It's not aggression.
Yeah.
And this is why we,
here, if I can interject, here the autism also plays a part because there is that we emote differently. Mm-hmm. So what you might consider aggression, I consider passion, and we might have a fight to you, whereas to me it's a discussion.
Well, that's one of the things that it's one of my favorite conversations you and I have ever had. Actually, was about the whole, autistic people having kind of their own language. It's like a different version of English from people that aren't autistic. And it you know, that was something that, you know, as I've known you through the years, it's become, you know, like I've started to pick up on it. There are certain things that you don't understand how I'm speaking, and there are things that you say, and I'm just like, wait, why is he wording it that way? That doesn't make sense. Yeah. But it's fascinating, and I think it's sometimes it is the tonalities of the voice. Right. Sometimes, like you've talked about how like if I get to a point where I just need you to leave, I have to literally say, Stefnir, please leave. Yeah. Otherwise, you don't necessarily recognize that I'm like, all right, guys, got to wrap things up. And you're just like, oh, okay, so we've got about 45 more minutes.
Right, right. Yeah. Picking up on social cues and all of that stuff. It's in the past, it was very common for me to, you know, not pick up when a party was over. Mm-hmm. You know, when everybody started leaving, I'd just be like, what happened? Yeah. Right. Whereas it was just, you know, the party was over. So, yeah.
And I want to kind of talk about, because I mean, one thing that I've always, like whenever I speak at a school and I'm like, oh, what is one question that I wish they would ask me? It's what would you say are things about, bipolar disorder or autism, that you don't think people really know about, or they don't really get spoken about, you know, no, like, because everyone kind of hears, to be fair, I mean, everyone kind of hears their information from Autism Speaks. Yeah. Which, you know, we have our opinions on. I really wish that they wouldn't just base everything on fear. But that's a whole other conversation. We're not going to go into that. But what are things that you don't think that people get talked about?
Well, concerning the autism thing, I think it's the you know, the tone deafness and how there's a different way of communicating with all the subtext that goes into language. Really, it's hard to pick up on for a lot of people. So if y'all could just be a little more direct and to the point, that would be great. You know,
and maybe a little patient as well.
Yeah, patience comes into it a lot, because I might seem insensitive and I might seem aggressive, but I'm so not. You know,
I mean, you're like a giant teddy bear.
I know, right? Conversations I've had with my friends about like emotional stuff gets me really emotional, and so it's not like I'm a robot because I'm autistic. It's just that my way of showing empathy and my way of emoting is completely different. So,
well, and also, I mean, autism is kind of similar. Like there has a similarity to Tourette syndrome in the sense that I mean, first of all, there's stimming. That's a whole topic in itself. But there's also the idea, like everyone that is, you know, really educated in about Tourette syndrome talks about how no two people with Tourette syndrome have the same tics.
Exactly.
They can have similar tics. I mean, Elva and I have both had the cough. We've both had tics with our mouth, with our nose, things like that. But we don't have the same tics. Right. I mean, even those ones, there have definitely their
similarities. Right.
But would you? And I've heard that is kind of similar with autism as well. Right. Autistic people will have similar traits. Right. Like I've noticed. I have noticed with the three performers that we've had in Voices that are autistic. We've had you, we've had Carmela Torini, unbelievable comedian. We've had Steindor, and the three of you. I've noticed one thing that's kind of fascinating is that you guys when you're planning your sets, you plan it mathematically. Yeah. So you plan it based on logic. You base it on, okay, I've got 5 minutes, so here's 5 minutes of material. But what you don't take into account is the riffing. When you get nervous, when you get anxiety, you know, everyone, you know, well, or you don't take into account the audience applauding or things like that. Yeah. So a 5-minute bit might turn into a 20-minute bit. And I noticed with Carmela, she had a problem with the timer.
Yeah.
Being in front of her counting down, she got anxious with that.
Yeah.
So she just simply didn't look at it.
Right.
And then it would get to wrap it up and she'd be like 20 minutes later, she'd be like, oh, I'm out of time.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk on that a bit?
I've had to consciously think in my material when I'm writing it and when I'm rehearsing it and when I'm, because when I'm writing it, I usually go word for word. And a lot of people take notes and, have like a sentence to work off of, but I go word for word. And it's only recently where I've thought to myself, all right, here I need to give them a breather for laughter.
Right.
And here I need to give them, because sometimes it's shocking what I'm saying, so I need to give them a bit of time to digest what I just said. And that's only happened recently, because I used to, when delivering my material, people would laugh, but I would keep going, so they would miss the beginning of the next bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some of my material just went over their heads.
Well, this is actually, I mean, this is a pretty awesome topic. I love talking about this because, I mean, when it comes to comedy in general, I mean, there's so much that people don't think about that goes on. Everyone that doesn't do comedy, they think, oh, you just write some jokes, you go on stage, you tell the jokes, and it's just like, all right, well, but there's so much more that goes into it. Well, first of all, there's staying on time. I mean, that's a huge one because of respect to the other comedians. And also, if you want to get booked again, you stay on time.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you've got certain words are funnier than other words. You know, like I've had this conversation with so many comedians about the fact that if you're saying like this dude versus this guy, you always want to go toward guy because when you say the word, it makes you smile more.
Yeah.
And people like...
There are so many nuances like that.
Yeah. And I mean, then you've got things of, you have to be so present to react to everything happening in the room. Look, you have to remember your material, but also like if someone in the back of the room says something and then you go, oh crap, I have a bit on that. You have to wait until you get that perfect opportunity. There's also your stage presence. There's how you're holding the microphone, how you're standing,
what you do with the microphone stand.
What you do with the microphone stand.
Right.
There's also, I mean, with Tourette's, I've had to, I had a tick where, because my hand shakes a lot, I would hold on to the mic stand, but then I would be moving the mic stand a lot, and it got distracting. I had to be so present in where I'm putting my hand to not be distracting.
Right.
And I mean, just thinking about all the stuff we've talked about autism and thinking, holy crap, I mean, I know how it is for me, but thinking about how it is for you, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. The beauty of doing it again and again, because we've done it so many times.
Oh, yeah.
Is that you can gauge and quantify, sort of. I mean, it's hard to quantify different audiences and that sort of thing, but there are at certain points in my Voices bit that I've been able to just mathematically go into, here's where they laugh.
Right.
And it's because of this. And all right, so if I try and move it around a little, I get a smaller laugh when I do this. I get a bigger laugh when I do that. So practicing is really good. And I've also been meaning to get into watching myself, but I have such a hard time watching myself.
Oh, join the club, man.
Yeah.
It's so hard to watch yourself.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, I mean, Stefnir, he actually has a moment in his stand-up that actually describes comedy, like an aspect of comedy, so beautifully. And that is, he tells a joke and then people laugh and he literally stands there for a second and then goes, honestly, I have no idea why that's funny.
Right.
But people laugh, so I tell it.
Yeah.
And there's so much about comedy that literally makes no fucking sense, but we keep saying it. Because like I had a joke I still do, and for a long time I had no idea why it was funny. It's the joke about meditation.
Right.
I was doing a meditation on an app on my phone.
Sure.
And I went to sleep, or I laid down in bed. It was sleep meditation. And then I do this thing about how it's like, imagine yourself in a world where everything is peaceful and relaxing. Now take a deep breath in. And it turns out the phone died. Right. And I was like, my phone died. I thought I was just supposed to hold my breath in for that long. Yeah. And I mean, obviously that joke works better on stage. But the point is, people laughed so much when I was like, oh, my phone died. And I've gotten applause at that joke. I've gotten people coming up to me afterwards saying that was their favorite joke of the night. Yeah. And for so long, I was like, but why?
Yeah.
Why was it funny?
Right.
And I literally had to have another comedian explain to me why my own joke was funny. And I was like, oh, shoot. All right.
There it is.
There it is. But that's the thing about some of this other stuff is we just have to learn. And we have to be so conscious with what's going on, every word that we're saying, everything that the audience laughs at. We have to analyze it and we have to go, why did they laugh at it?
Yeah.
Why was that bit funny tonight, but it wasn't funny last week?
Right.
There's so much involved.
You got to be conscious about the energy you bring to the stage and can you maintain it? And if the energy that you're performing with isn't working, what do you do to adjust?
Right.
What do you do if you bring like a nervous energy to the stage and people empathize and they get it.
Right.
It might give you a certain likability. But if you go up there with a nervous energy and they don't get it, that just means you're nervous and not good at what you're doing.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier, about when you started Voices and there was that joke about, on Crazy, I've got hours of material.
Yeah.
How do you, as you've come to learn, you don't have hours of material.
No,
You've got hours of ideas, but you don't have hours of material. How did you come to decide what are ideas and what is material?
Well, my stuff is story-based for the most part. So if it serves the story, it's material. If it sort of, if it fits into the momentum of what I'm doing, because I'm not a one-liner comedian, not at all. So yeah, if it fits into because I'm going for I might be going for like a theme. If it fits into that, I'll use it. If it doesn't, it's a fun story I might tell in the green room.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and because you do have. We've all had jokes that we've tried on stage and they didn't work.
Right.
Or we decided, I don't really like that one as much. Have you had material that you maybe didn't do in a long time, but then you came up with a new joke and you were just like, ooh, that old joke would be perfect for this?
Yeah.
Because we talk about how we never truly we never truly scrap material.
No. It's always in the database. Yeah, I've actually, because of the break during COVID and that sort of thing, I got real nervous about starting to perform again. And I didn't perform the first weekend we were open at the Secret Cellar.
Right.
So that just built onto the nervousness. But after having done that, I sort of started incorporating and rearranging stuff.
Right.
And I did Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it was mostly old stuff. But I just rearranged it in a way that it seemed new to me.
Yeah.
And connecting jokes in a different way. So in that sense, yeah, I've been trying to find new angles to old stuff.
Right. That's a whole topic in itself, though, is the arranging of jokes. I feel like we're now at the podcast where we talk about how to write comedy. But no, it is so fascinating because I remember at one point we talked about this. We talked about the arrangement of your jokes. Same thing with my jokes. We talked about the arrangement of my jokes because when you're doing a show like Voices, it's like we want to talk about everything that we're going through.
Absolutely.
Because as so many comedians have said this, it's a form of therapy going on stage.
Absolutely.
So there is that sense
and Voices even more so.
Right? So there is that sense of we want to go on stage and talk about everything going on in our heads. We want everyone to know what's going on in our heads so we can learn from it, you know? But then comes the thing of how much is too much for one set?
Right.
You know, because like when you talk about autism and then you talk about bipolar disorder, how do you decide? Do you decide? I'm going to talk about this one tonight, or if you're going to talk about both of them, do you decide? Okay, I'm going to talk about only one for one part of it, and then I'm going to talk about the other one, or do you mix and match? How do you go about the order to decide how much of each thing you're talking about and when you're talking about it?
Well, if there's a way to segue, I like using segues.
Right.
So if there's a way to segue from one to the other, that's beautiful. So I'll do that.
Like the tripolar joke.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful segue.
Yeah. Thanks, man. And that's another thing with the autism, because we touched on the autism earlier. When I'm given a compliment that I agree with, I'll just go, yes. Instead of going, thank you, or, showing the appreciation, because I'll just go, yes, you're right. You know?
Well, it is an opinion I agree with.
Yes, indeed. So that's another thing.
I think to a certain extent, though, I mean, people always fear ego, but I think it is okay sometimes, because like there was something I was learning when I was, I was doing some classes where we talked about business and marketing and stuff like that. And then there is a certain extent that you should never apologize.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to seem weak, but also you don't want to lose your confidence.
Right.
You do need confidence. And and this is one of the bits of advice that I love that I've gotten about stand up is it's all about your confidence level. It's all about confidence. You go on stage and like Jojo Sutherland, a comedian from Scotland, she gave me one of the best bits for this is and I think literally word for word was fuck what the audience thinks, tell them what's funny.
Yeah.
And it's that confidence thing. It's that thing of I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to tell you guys exactly what you're going to laugh at. And you're going to laugh at it because I wrote it for you to laugh at.
Right.
And it's the same thing when someone gives you a compliment and you say, yeah, that's true. I do that.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't view it as an ego driven thing. I view it as, you know what? Maybe I never thought about it that way. Or also, yes, I have thought about it that way, and that's exactly why I do it.
Right.
And I'm glad that someone else is pointing this out because I really wanted it to be, to be apparent.
Yeah. Well, it's not even about wanting it to be apparent. It's just that, like you hand me a book and you go, "This book is blue," and I go, "Yes." It's just a matter of you do this. And I don't pick up on it being a compliment.
Well, actually, the book is baby blue. I mean, to get real, real critical on this.
Right.
To get the facts straight.
Right.
but yeah, and have you ever had sets that you've rearranged because of maybe the set didn't work as well, or did you just? For example, I've had sets that I tried putting a joke in a specific place because I thought that it would work really well. But then after a few times of trying it out, I noticed that specific joke wasn't working quite well. So I put it at a different part of the set and then it worked beautifully.
Yeah. Yeah. Like with the tripolar thing. Yeah, that's definitely been a thing. Not so much during my short sets, like if I get 5 minutes at an open mic, because being story based and in that sense, I have to have a connection, right, so that my jokes work. But in the voices thing, yeah, absolutely, I rearrange stuff all the time. Yeah,
and I want to take a bit of a turn here and talk about bipolar disorder again, because there was one topic of this that I mean, you've talked about this at the ends of your sets about manic episodes. That is another thing that I mean, like people who don't have Tourette syndrome ask me, how can they help?
Yeah.
How can they know what to talk about, what to do? Can they joke about it? Blah blah blah. But with manic episodes, one thing I really wanted to make sure we discuss in this is the signs.
Yeah.
From like for me, because I saw you from start to finish of the manic episode.
Yeah.
I now know the signs to look for.
Yeah.
And there is one that you actually say in your sets, and that is the lack of sleep.
Yeah.
There's one like a moment where you say that if you think you have sleep figured out, you don't need that anymore. You might be going crazy.
Yeah. Definitely.
What from the side of the manic episode? How do you get to that point? I mean, what is that? What's going on in your head when you actually literally decide, I don't think I need sleep anymore?
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah. It's just that it gets harder to actually sleep.
Okay.
So you don't feel the need for it. You don't get tired. Yeah. So if I don't need to sleep, why bother?
Right.
Why try? Why not just stay awake and do my thing? Because I have so many ideas rolling around in my head. Why don't I just execute those and I'll sleep later?
I mean,
then later becomes later and later and later until eventually you're only sleeping like 2 to 3 hours a day.
And it's like you were talking about earlier about how when you're in a manic episode, everything is kind of on hyperdrive.
Absolutely.
Your brain is working so quickly that's also a factor of this.
Yeah.
And from the end of that I was on, because and of course, manic episodes can be so different.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're kind of, I should mention that we're basically talking about the one that you had in Sweden and then in Finland.
Yeah.
Because that was the same trip for you.
Yeah.
What happened for
it was quite a trip.
Yeah. What I noticed from my perspective, and it was the same thing that I was mentioning earlier, but there is another thing I want to mention in a second, is that basically I noticed that you were getting short-tempered with everyone, but gradual. Like everything would be. I remember right before we left for Sweden, you were like, "Okay, Dan, I need you to come downstairs, and we're gonna move some stuff real quick." And I'm like, "Wait, but we have to be at the airport in 30 minutes." And you're just like, "Yep, but we have to do this first." I'm like, "Okay, why didn't you do this before? Dan, I'm already downstairs. Just get downstairs." And that was kind of the start, because you're not that kind of person normally.
Absolutely
you don't normally
not.
talk like that.
No.
So I noticed that something was going on, but I didn't know what it was. And then throughout Sweden, that trip, I did notice it got progressively shorter and shorter tempered until finally there was a moment that I truly noticed. Like I realized this because of another comedian that a mutual friend of ours. Both of you had a moment when you were smack dab, like at the peak of the manic episode. You both had a show, and for you it was in Sweden.
Yeah,
it was painful to watch because it sounded so. You just sounded so aggressive on stage. There were no punchlines to your jokes. You were it was basically you were trying to get the information out to people.
Yeah.
But everyone in the room felt uncomfortable.
Seemed like a rage rant.
Right. And then you walked off stage. You came to me. I was behind stage, kind of a shocked look on my face that you just didn't notice. And you said, "What'd you think of them apples?" And then walked past me with the biggest smile on your face.
Yeah.
And then afterward, you said to me that was the best moment of your career, and that was the best set you think you've ever done.
Yeah.
But on our end, we were like, okay, we're going to take him to a hospital when we're back.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with the other comedian, though, because he had a set where he just completely bombed, and everyone was left flabbergasted, like, what was going on? And he thought that was his best set.
Yeah.
And these are little things that, if you notice that someone who has bipolar disorder is showing signs of things that are very odd, I mean, you should ask questions, but also because you don't think anything's wrong.
No.
So it's hard for us to go to you and say, I think something is wrong.
Yeah.
What do we do in that situation from your perspective? Once we realize something's happening.
That's really hard to say.
Exactly.
Once people on the outside start noticing that something's awry, it's hard to get to the person that's manic.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to well, yeah, if you can, by any, if you have any opportunity to get them in the hands of a professional, of like a mental health professional, that'd be the best.
Because that was the scariest thing on our end, was that we had to make a judgment call.
Yeah.
Based on your behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, whose decision is that to make other than a professional? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we had to make that decision. We had to make that call. Well, I mean, of course, we were right, and we dealt with the situation. We got you help, and after this conversation, I actually want to discuss what you've done since this, because it's your journey since Sweden has been so absolutely inspiring, and I do want to talk about that. But this is the hardest thing, I think, for someone that doesn't have the manic episode, is how do I know that I need to take them in? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
Yeah.
It really is.
But afterwards, I think I'd much rather be taken in and it not being the case,
of course,
than not taken in. You know what I mean? And I'm just glad that it happened as soon as it did. Yeah. Because if you're psychotic for long enough, you might not come back. You know what I mean? Right. And I was only psychotic for like a day. Yeah. But I was manic for way longer. Right. Where I still had a grasp on reality, but somewhat. You've talked about how you remember everything that happened. Yeah. So it's not like a blackout where not like for me at least. Yeah, like I've taken medications for Tourette syndrome and gotten blackouts. Yeah. And that's a situation where I literally don't know what happened, but you know everything that happened. Manic episodes are not blackouts. Well, not for me, but they can be. They can be. Yeah. Okay. They can be for it's such an individual case. It's an individually based. Yeah. But for me, both my episodes, I've remembered everything. Yeah. Which is, I think, in my opinion, is probably a good thing, because that means I came back whole. Yeah. I'm not going to talk too much about your other manic episode, because that's in your stand-up. I don't want to give it away. Yeah. It's a great story. I mean, it's weird to say it's a great story, because I'm sure for you it wasn't exactly the highlight of your life, No. Or like something. It felt great at the time. Oh, it probably. I can imagine it probably did. But I do want to talk about the journey afterward, because you have one of the most inspiring stories, in my opinion, and you've become such a hero to me. And the reason why I say this is because so before Sweden, until Sweden, I would say until Finland, because that's where you went after Sweden. You described you would say that you were self-medicating. Yeah. With marijuana, to make it sound so proper. But you were basically, I remember you were smoking a lot. Yeah. You were smoking cigarettes. Yeah. You never really were an alcoholic. You never really drank a lot. Not really, no. But you did a lot of the other stuff. And but since Finland, you have cut everything out. Yeah. You cut the weed out. Yeah. You cut you drink occasionally, but you don't drink a lot. No, I'll have maybe half a drink. But you cut out smoking as well. You cut out everything, and you've stuck with it, and it's actually almost officially been a year. I think September is when it happens, so September will be a full year. Yeah. This was last September, and you're still going. That is incredible, man. Thanks. Just absolutely proud of you. I really how does it feel to be done with all this stuff? Well, I'm finally now on the proper medication. I've tried throughout the years so many different types of medication, and the side effects have always been so severe that whenever I've felt better, I figured, I'm better now. I don't need my medication anymore. Right. So I just that's a vicious cycle that a lot of people with bipolar disorder go through. So it's been a roller coaster, but now that I'm finally on the right medication that doesn't have the side effects that on me, because it differs for every person. But this seems to be a cocktail that works. So I don't feel the need to self-medicate anymore.
Right.
I don't feel the need to alter my state of mind anymore.
And also one thing, we've talked about this, but I want to say this in the podcast for any comedian that's listening, because I mean, let's face it. We all like to have something before we perform to take the edge off, make us feel more comfortable. I mean, I always liked to have just one beer before I perform. No, you liked to smoke before you would perform, just to take the edge off.
Yeah.
But I've actually I switched a while ago to if I'm going to have a beer on stage, because when you have a beer on stage, or it looks like you have a beer, people want to drink. They think you're drinking with them. Yeah. They have it, and that it is a bit of a psychological thing.
Sure.
But the thing is that I switched to non-alcoholic beer because, and it's the same thing that I've noticed with you tremendously since you've gotten clean. Clean is kind of a strong word for you were smoking weed, but still,
I was smoking such large quantities.
Yeah, but I've noticed you've gotten sharper. You've gotten more present in the moment. As soon as if anyone says a single thing in the crowd, you hear it. You're present with it. You know what's going on. Mm-hmm. But before you were fumbling on jokes. You couldn't remember where you were. I remember there were sets where you would start a joke at the beginning and then you would finish it toward the end of your set just because you forgot you were doing that joke.
Right, yeah.
And it was like everything was all over the place. But now everything is so tight. Everything is so like neatly wrapped in with a bow on top. And the extra packaging just to make sure that you're safe. Everything is so on point that and it's because you're not doing any of this stuff. It's because you're sober.
Yeah. I mean, I was smoking so much. I was high more than I was straight.
Yeah.
So.
And you're not straight either.
No. I'm all over the place.
You just everything describes you.
Yeah. But coming back from that, I mean, I've been smoking cannabis since I was 14.
Yeah.
So I'm experiencing a new world, essentially, without the fog, Yeah. The fog's been lifted. And it's surprising to me how much clearer everything is, how it's simpler. Really, I thought I was making it simpler with the substances. I thought I was, easing my mind, and I thought I was, but all it did was slow me down and clog up, the creative aspect of everything.
Right. I mean, and to put this in perspective, I mean, you talked about how you had been smoking since 14.
Yeah.
And you just turned 40.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time to be doing it.
Yeah.
But now to see you sticking with it and almost 1 year away from it all is unbelievable, man. But we are actually running low on time here.
Yeah.
But Stefnir, it's been absolutely it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, man. Same here.
we talk pretty much every day. So it's, and we're going to talk about some of this stuff just in general because we do that. That's just us. And we do that.
What we do.
But to those of you listening in, first of all, thank you so much for listening. If you ever have any questions or topics that you want us to discuss in this podcast, just send them to us at info@mvhtshow.com. That's info@mvhtshow.com. If you want to support the show and keep this going and get us, doing bigger and better things, helping us out with that, please check out paypal.me/mvhtshow. That's paypal.me/mvhtshow. You can find out more about us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, just searching either My Voices Have Tourettes or MVHT Show. You can also find us on our website at mvhtshow.com. This episode has been brought to you by Gamesless Studio. You can find them on Facebook. The Secret Cellar, Iceland's first and only comedy club is on Facebook, Instagram, and thesecretseller.is. And Smaury's Volcano Sauces, the best hot sauces on the planet. They have a Facebook, Instagram, and smaury'svolcanosauce.com. You can find all the links that I've mentioned and everything that we've talked about in the show in the description below. This podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Podcasts, YouTube, and more. So please, find us on those. If you like the podcast, please rate it on streaming services. If you give us a 5 stars, we will love you forever. You are also, of course, welcome to leave us a 1-star review, but if you do, several of us have anxiety and panic disorder, and we will remember this every day for the rest of our lives, but we will still love you, of course. So please, leave a rating for us and a review, and feel free to follow and share the podcast to anyone and everyone so that we can get everyone listening to this. Again, thank you so much for listening, and check out all of our new episodes every Tuesday.